In a world that rarely slows down, how do we make decisions we can actually trust? My guest today is Brother Matt Wooters, a Jesuit brother, a trained therapist, and assistant director of campus ministry at John Carroll University, also a John Carroll University alumnus. And Brother Matt is also the founder of Brother's Keeper, which is an initiative focused on building community among young men and creating spaces for honest conversations about life. So today he's here to talk with us about how the Jesuit practice of discernment can sharpen our judgment and bring clarity even to the hardest choices. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely, Carolyn. It's awesome to be with you.
Well, I'm excited for our conversation, and I think a good place to start us off is to understand where this practice of discernment comes from and how the Jesuits think about it. So maybe take us back to St. Ignatius of Loyola, who started the whole thing. Tell us who he was, what was he all about, and how did this come to be?
Sure. So St. Ignatius is the founder of the Jesuits, and he is one of the great wisdom figures in the Western canon. He's considered actually like the world's first psychologist because he could understand the human psyche and kind of his own neurosis as well. So he's raised as a knight in a court, and he's raised around all that kind of fanciness, and he very much aspires to that lifestyle. He aspires to be handsome and brave and charming, and his early life was filled with kind of a worldliness of desiring people's attention and affection. This all changed. He got hit by a cannonball, somewhat famous story in Jesuit circles, and it changed his life. So he had a lot of time to think about what did he actually want. So over the course of his life, he ends up founding the Jesuits. We fast forward, he founds the Jesuits, and he has this whole system of belief of how do we make choices, how do we notice, how do we make discernments, and how do we go forward. So he's really helpful because he has kind of solidified this, now we call it Jesuit discernment. But
Absolutely. Okay, so walk us through the difference between just making a decision and discernment. What makes discernment unique?
Yeah, so we decide what we're going to have for dinner. We discern where we're going to go to college. Those are different levels. And in the Jesuit tradition, we would say, first, you have to notice. So the first step is always noticing for discernment. And what is the consequence of the choice, right? If it's dinner, it doesn't matter, right? If it's what you're going to wear, it doesn't matter. Where you're going to move, who you're going to marry, what you're going to study, if you're going to change majors, these are bigger discernments because they involve more of your life, of who you are. So the first step is always to notice, and we always discern between goods. So Ignatius says, rule number one, you can't discern between a good choice and a not a good choice. That's obvious. Make the good choice.
Yep.
You discern between two good options that have very valid reasons and different pulls. And so then you get into the weeds of how do you then make the choice?
Absolutely. Okay, so he gives us a framework for this, right? And so it's an examen. Talk us through this practice of the examen, and how can anyone, whether in a religious context or a social context or a professional context or any context, right? How can you put this into use in real life?
Sure. So it's grounded in gratitude. So Ignatius tells Jesuits that we should do the examen twice a day, at midday and in the evening. And you're looking back on the previous couple hours, the previous day, the previous month, the previous semester. So you have some framework that you're looking back on. And you start in gratitude. What stands out to you that you're grateful for from that morning, from that semester, from senior year of high school? And so first we start with gratitude because we don't always notice it in the moment. So we need to take time to say, oh, actually, that person was so generous with me. And oh, I found that 20-minute car ride, it was really peaceful on the way to work. So noticing the gratitude first. So we always start in gratitude. Next, we kind of review our life like a movie. So you replay your own actions, let it unfurl and kind of see, what did you notice? What did you notice about yourself? What did you notice about others? What did you not notice in the moment? Like, oh, wow, that really stuck out to me. And is there a pivot point? I wasn't really my best self there, or I was a little bit rushed, or I was a little bit selfish, or I wasn't as generous as I could have been. So, and then what do you need for tomorrow, or what's to come, for the afternoon, for the next chapter, for the next semester? I really need to settle down. I really need to be off my phone more. So it's rooted in gratitude, and then also knowing that we can pivot, and we can pivot our behavior. And so what's really important to notice is the strong feelings. So this is perhaps different than other spiritual traditions, where Ignatius says that your feelings matter. Your feelings really matter. And that's actually how God would communicate to you if you use a religious lens, is that your strong desires, where you feel alive, is really important to pay attention. So for an example, I graduated from John Carroll many years ago. My first step on campus, I noticed something light up in me. I noticed that I felt alive in a way that other schools didn't. I didn't have the same vibe. And so that noticing of aliveness is really important to pay attention to. Ignatius would say, like, gold star.
Absolutely. Well, and I guess maybe my next question is, what if the feeling that you're feeling is maybe fear? So to go back to that point about choosing your college, or for any student who might be in this process of choosing a college right now, what if it's a different feeling? What if it's fear? Can you trust that? Or do those feelings get in the way sometimes?
Yeah. So I would say pay attention to what you're feeling. So first you have to notice. And so if you notice you're really afraid, fear's not a good or bad feeling. Fear is neutral. Our relationship with fear is really helpful, though. Are you afraid to give a talk in class because it's a big thing? That's a normal feeling. Are you afraid to give that presentation at work? That doesn't mean you stop doing it, but you notice the fear, and the fear can compel you forward. If you notice fears like another fear is someone says, hey, we're going to go feed the homeless. And you're like, oh, that's a community I'm not as familiar with. I might feel a little afraid. If you choose not to do that because of the fear, you're actually limiting yourself. So first, just notice. Notice we're all afraid. We're all afraid all the time. And how do you notice it and then choose what to do with it?
Absolutely. So, as we think about any kind of choice that we need to make, if we fail to take that pause, if we fail to stop and reflect, what are we at risk of losing?
I think regret would come up, actually. I think rushing through life, rushing through choices, you then kind of catch your breath later and you're like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I just was hustling. Or like the log flume motion of like, this is what happens next naturally. I see that with the students I work with. Sometimes you start with a major and then sophomore, junior year, you decide, actually, I'm feeling called in this other direction. And it's really brave of them to notice and to make a new choice.
Yeah.
So in Jesuit speak, in the Ignatian world, we would use two big words, consolation and desolation. Consolation is a feeling of a bigness, of growing, feeling alive, any increase in faith, hope, or love. So any sort of growth. Desolation is the opposite. Desolation is a smallness, it's a cutting off, it's a dryness, and it's an isolation. So an example I use in my Ignatian spirituality class is you're invited by your mom to go out to dinner and you turn off your phone and you're just present with her. And you notice yourself kind of laughing and joking. You're totally present at the moment. So there's a bigness, there's a connection. You're meeting a moment. You're invited to go to dinner with your mom and the whole time you're looking at your phone. You don't feel great after that. There's a dryness, there's a yuckiness. There's like, oh, that was a missed opportunity. And that's the pivot point for the Examen. So when you review your day, you notice, oh, actually, I felt really alive in this moment, or I actually felt really dry. And that's just like it's a gut thing. It's very clear.
What I love so much about that is it sort of takes the process of trying to make a pragmatic choice, or maybe comparing factors that you might write down on a pro and con list, and it really kind of takes it somewhere deeper, maybe something that's more connected to purpose and to noticing, right? And so I think that's just such a useful activity that if we get into a practice of recognizing those feelings in ourselves, it may guide us through kind of a process of daily choices, right? So we talked about this with the big decision, right? But how do we get better at this? How do we practice this so that it becomes more natural to notice those feelings, to reflect, to make wise choices?
So Ignatius's seminal masterpiece is called the Spiritual Exercises, and it's like real exercise. You need reps. So if you just go try to run a 5K, it's gonna be not great. You're gonna be really sore, and you're gonna never choose to do that again.
Totally learned that through practice. Absolutely.
And if you run for 3 minutes a morning, you're going to get better at that.
Yeah.
And so the more you notice, the better you get at noticing. The more you notice gratitude, the more you notice gratitude. So once your vision is set on gratitude, you start to notice gratitude more in real time. And Ignatius has some really practical tips. This is what I love about the Jesuit tradition. It's very practical. He offers some tips when making a choice, any choice, big or small. Mostly, let's talk about a bigger choice, is run it by someone else. We can get in our own head. We can psych ourselves out. We can think of all the reasons we shouldn't do this, or we should in a way that's unhelpful. Run it by someone else. So someone you trust and love, someone that knows you. When I when I felt called to join the Jesuits, big scary choice for the rest of my life. I ran it by people in my life, and people who knew me really well said, "Oh yeah, I see this for you." It was so affirming to have the mirror of like, I know who you are. I know what you're good at. And of course I see this for you.
Yeah.
Great. Great. The second one is, what advice would you give a friend? Get out of your own way. If someone is presenting this information to you, what advice would you give a friend? And frequently we're more generous with other people than we are with ourselves. And so that's very obvious. Lastly, this one's kind of intense. Ignatius says, think about your deathbed. So think about the end of your life. Fast forward. You're there at the end. What choices? Pretend you made one choice and pretend you made the other choice. Generally, it's pretty clear. Like, I wish I had done this, or I wish I hadn't been so afraid that I did go do that service trip in Central America, or whatever the example is.
Wow. That's an incredibly clarifying exercise. Just to be able to put that, sort of force the reflection, force the opportunity to evaluate your choice. I love that. I'm going to practice that from now on. As we kind of round out towards our goal of helping folks have a practical takeaway here, I just want to ask you, kind of about interior state. So you're a trained therapist.
Mm-hmm.
How do we ready ourselves for this? Is there anything about our own kind of interior thought space, our kind of our mindset that would help us get ready for more reflective practices day to day?
Creating the space. We live in such a loud, busy, beeping, buzzing notifications world. And something that I share with my students is that that's not neutral. It wants your eyeballs and it wants your attention. And so we can feel bad that we're locked into our phones, but it's built so we don't look away. The news cycle is built so we don't look away. And so we actually have to choose to step away. And so in the Jesuit tradition, we have a big tradition of doing retreats, stepping away from your job and day. That can happen every day. That can happen on your car ride. That can happen with a cup of coffee in the morning. This can be 5 minutes. How do we just check in and let the dust settle a little bit? How do we go on a walk when you're walking the dog and not look at your phone? Just be walking the dog. And sometimes the clarity that comes with creating space is the space you need just to rest.
Absolutely. All right. So let's think about what a person could put into action maybe tonight. You've given us a lot of practical ways that we can practice this ability to reflect and create interior space and to pay attention to what we're experiencing, feelings of consolation, desolation. Let's say I've had an encounter today or this week that's giving me some information about a big decision. What might I do just tonight to kind of think through or kind of lead me through that practice of arriving at a discerning choice in any matter?
Yeah. So I would say very practically, journaling is such a great way because you put it on paper. And so even if you're not a journaler, bullet points are your notes app, right?
Mm-hmm.
So noticing where you feel alive and noticing what makes you feel afraid. I just think as simple as that, it's just helpful to see it on paper and say, I felt alive when, or I felt on fire when, I felt welcome when, I felt my best self when. I did not feel like my best self in these moments. Or when I was at the grocery store, I was kind of a jerk to that woman. Whatever. Just notice where your sea changes are in yourself, because it's just so helpful to see on paper. So notice where you feel alive and notice where you feel afraid. I think we don't talk about fear enough. I think we don't talk about the role of fear, that we all navigate this. And sometimes you got to do things that's scary. I mean, moving to college is scary. That's a big, scary decision. You're leaving what you know, you're leaving your friend group. And sure, college isn't for everybody. I think the people who go to college and navigate their fear the best is they get involved really quickly and they put themselves a little bit out there. And that's just one example of a discernment. Where the role of fear could bring you home. You could live in your mom's house forever. You could never leave. For most of us, we're not called to that. And so how do you take a step, a big scary step, and be brave about it and notice your fear?
Yeah. Well, as we think about that, I mean, gosh, how do we, right? Like, so when fear shows up in a choice that we're making, how we might not realize it, right? Like what if that is the loudest voice we hear? How do we quiet that?
So you bring up a great point. So Ignatius actually has feedback for this. He says that desolation, which in the spiritual lens, we say the voice of the evil spirit, is very loud. It's very loud, and it sounds something like this. You're stupid, you're a jerk, nobody likes you. If you do this, you're definitely, like, all your friends are going to ditch you. Now, we all know some version of that voice, right, which is not our best self. And then there is the voice of the good spirit, which is very soft and very quiet and very warm. So frequently, the evil spirit in the Jesuit tradition would be anxiety producing and in your head, kind of like bouncing around, really anxious. The voice of the good spirit is actually like more in your body, in your chest, and it's warmer and it's very quiet. And that's how Ignatius would say, like, God's love is with us. It's like the sunshine. You don't always notice it's there, and then suddenly you're feeling warm and you notice you're like, oh, this is a great day. So there's a difference in noticing, but the pause and the noticing is really important. And then which voice are you making your choices based off of? The quiet and the warm, or the loud and the anxious?
That's fascinating. So, I mean, I might, or many might interpret that, right? That negative self-talk, that negative voice. If that persists, now asking you maybe to switch to your therapy hat, how do we think about creating like a better interior condition? You talked about the value of bouncing things off of other people and hearing outside perspective. Any practices that folks could put into use daily to try to quiet that interior voice?
Yeah, I would say reframe. What's the reframe?
Mm-hmm.
So let's use an example. Okay. Matt, you shouldn't be on that podcast. Nobody wants to listen to you. Okay, so let's use that as a voice. The reframe there for me might be, what a cool opportunity. I can't wait to see how this goes, right? And so sometimes like a little bit of curiosity pivots from judgment and decision-making to like openness and like, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes when I go on that podcast.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it gets you more information too. Totally. That helps to build confidence. Do you ever see that occurring as you're pausing and noticing and reframing?
Absolutely. When I work with students and they come with me with something very stern and a lot of self-judgment, which is common for young people who are uncertain, I will say that again to me, like as if you like yourself. And they pause and they're like, well, it would sound more like this. And then you actually have better information to work with.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, let's listen to that guy. Yeah. That first one seemed a little mean.
So what you're describing is just a level of intentionality, maybe, right? And mindfulness on recognizing the voice that you hear, recognizing the information you've taken in, pausing, noticing, right? We've hit some really important topics here. So maybe let's switch gears here in just a moment to kind of our close. But before we get there, I want to ask you to sort of summarize for us, right? We've hit a lot of key components. So let's remind our listeners.
Sure.
They're going through. They're making they've got a big choice in front of them. They're not sure what to do. Both options are good options.
Both options are good options.
Or maybe there's 3 or 4 options, and they're all good options, and they're not sure what to do. So walk them through step by step. What do they do first? What do they do next? And we'll kind of summarize this conversation that way.
So first thing is practical realities, right? So Ignatius says if you have any sort of commitments, finances are involved, geography, like those are very practical. Include practical realities into your decision making. Mm-hmm. All that being equal, pause and notice. Notice where you feel alive and notice the draw. What is the draw to each option? So you notice the draw, notice in yourself how you feel. So when I think about that, how do I feel? When I think about that, how do I feel? Talk it out with someone that you trust and love, that has your best interest at heart, right? So someone who has no interest in the outcome, they just want your good, right? We want the good of the other. Talk it out. And then you have to make a decision. So this is the last step, is discernment. We don't discern for discernment's sake. We discern and we take a step.
Yep.
And I frequently share with young people, if this is helpful, discernment isn't a fireman's flashlight that we can see 2 miles down the road. That's not what discernment is. It's actually like a camping lantern that you can see the light right in front of around your feet. So you take your next step and that's lit up. And then you take your next step. Sometimes we want clarity for like 20 years. That's not how it works. We discern the choice in front of us and we take a step and we test it out. How does it feel?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the Jesuit practice of discernment, is camping lantern, not fireman flashlight.
I love that. And then you're discerning again. So now you do it again and you continue this daily practice.
Totally.
I love that.
So you discern, you decide, You keep discerning.
Well, and this is why Jesuits are often called contemplatives in action, right? Because it's very action-oriented. It's about making the greater choice, right?
That's right.
And so, sometimes these decisions can be selfish or feel like, what's the best decision for me? Choosing a college might be a good example of that. But talk to me a bit about the greater good, the Jesuits would say, for the greater glory of God.
That's right.
How do you work that in? Not just what's best for me, but what's best for everyone, for
Sure.
society, from whatever. Give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there is a fallacy that some of us who wear outfits like this, we're the ones that are supposed to do all the good and everyone else does It's like that is such an unhelpful binary where I actually think the question is, what are you good at? What do you love? And how can you serve others with it? Very practical. So whether you're in finance, whether you're in computer science, whether you want to study theater, how do we involve others and sharing our gifts with others? Our gifts are not meant to be hoarded by ourselves. And we see that at Carroll. I think we do such a great job in this community of bringing the good to light and sharing the good with the community locally and more than just in the quad. And so that's something I feel really drawn to. And I actually think it increases the sense of fulfillment for the person. So if you know that there's something bigger than yourself at stake, it feels better to be part of it rather than hyper individualistic. I'm just chasing a bank account, a career, a LinkedIn post, or whatever. That kind of like forms of success are fine, pretty shallow in terms of like outcomes.
Absolutely. So when you use your heart to find your purpose, right? You're listening to those feelings of consolation. You're making a choice for your career. That career might be in medicine or in finance or in education or whatever it's going to be. But what I'm hearing you say is that if I align myself and my own choices to what gives me those greatest feelings of consolation, then, I'm setting myself up to serve the world in a special way because I'm going to show up as my best self and true to who I am and what gifts I can bring. And so that might take many different forms for different people. But when you're purpose driven in how you make a choice versus outcomes driven or looking at the data on employment statistics, perhaps not that those aren't important factors, but if you really listen to those feelings of consolation versus desolation, you can't probably go wrong.
Can't go wrong. And in fact, that's what Ignatius says. So an early Jesuit said that consolation is a down payment for future service. So it's a little gift saying like, no, you're on the right path. Like keep going. You're in the right stream, as it were. And the result of that is like there's going to be an expectation that there's a kickback to others with our time, with our talent, with our energy.
Wonderful. That's a beautiful place to end. Let me just wrap by asking you the question that we ask every guest on this podcast, which is, what's the most important decision you've ever made, Brother Matt, in your life? And how did you arrive at it?
That's a great question. I think the natural answer would be the Jesuit one, but I'm not actually going to say that. I think the most important decision I made was I went on this service trip in high school for like 5 weeks to the Dominican Republic, and it was really scary. I was so far outside my comfort zone. I grew up at a private school. This was like very different from what I was used to, and something lit in me that is still burning. And so that 16-year-old boy noticed something in himself that was destabilizing and scary and really exciting. And I am doing this and here and actually back at Carroll because of that moment. So I was scared and I didn't let the fear stop me.
It's amazing. I mean, I often say to my kids, sometimes the hardest things are the most important. And, I think having that reflection is just so critical in how you can tie it back to other decisions. So there's your camping
That's
light,
it.
right?
That's
The
it.
lantern.
That's right.
You made that choice, and that's led you to the next and the next and the next. Wonderful. Well, Brother Matt, thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom with us, for being a part of this podcast, and thanks for sharing that very important experience in the Dominican Republic.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful.
Carolyn.
Thanks for your time.